Rodman Public Library, and this is our summer art classes, and I'm excited that you're here. My name is Linda Slack, and some of you I have taught before. We've had some good opportunities to sort of play with different materials, and today we're going to do another one. We're going to do something that is multimedia, which means we're going to use more than one kind of art supply. And I kind of wanted you to see, first of all, what you have in your packets. You should have a piece of watercolor paper like this. It's 11 inches by 14 inches, which is so it makes a really nice big piece. And you should have a pack of watercolor paper, or excuse me, watercolor paint. You also will have oil pastels, and you need those. And you will have a little tiny packet of seeds, and these are actually sunflower seeds that we're going to use as part of our artwork. So those are the supplies that you're going to have in your packet. And you will have this size brush. This is not a real good artistic brush, but it is great for what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to make sure we keep it clean, and we are going to use that with our watercolor. You will also have to have a glass of water, maybe an eraser, a pencil, and some paper towels in case we make a mess. Plus we also have to wipe off our brush. So those are the things you're going to need. A bottle of glue will come in handy later on, so that might be something else you want to just grab before you get started. All right, so what are we going to do today? We're going to create a watercolor oil pastel picture of sunflowers. And some of these are pretty simple. I don't want you to worry about, if you have never done this before, if it's going to be too hard. It's going to be pretty easy for you. But I wanted you to know that there are some pretty famous people who used sunflowers as their subject matter. This one is one of my favorites. The artist's name, and most of you will already recognize this, is Vincent Van Gogh. Vincent spent a great deal of time painting flowers, and one of his most famous paintings is this one over here. It's a big vase of very, very different size and color of sunflowers. So Van Gogh, being a famous artist, liked to do sunflowers, and I also brought a book that is, I think it's kind of fun to read, Sunflower House. This is by Eve Bunting. And the reason I brought this book for you to look at, maybe even take it out in the library, is talking about what you can do with real sunflower seeds, and you can build kind of a special place for you to play, which I'll show you a little bit later once we get started. Okay, so you want to paint and you want to work with your supplies today. I'm going to try to do this upside down so that you can see it. You have to decide whether you want to do 2 flowers or 3 flowers or 1 flower. It's really up to you. If you do 1 flower, I want you to do it really big so that you fill up the whole paper. If you choose to do 2 or 3, obviously you're going to have to start a lot smaller. And all I'm going to do is use my pencil as a guide, and I'm going to draw very, very lightly. So I'm going to start out with just kind of an odd-shaped circle, and then I'm going to make a second one, and I'm going to pull mine up here close to the top. Now you may not be able to see those real dark, but we don't want them to be very dark. We want them to be light so that they do not get in our way when we are actually doing our work. And then inside each of those, we're going to put another sort of a round shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to trace anything. You don't have to use a compass. We're going to make them same size, bigger, littler, whatever you want. And we're going to start in the center. You have oil pastels in a variety of colors, and all you're really going to need to do to start with today is to pick the browns. This one's kind of a peachy color. thought it had a name on it, but it doesn't. So we have 3 or 4 brown colors. You may use the peachy one. Don't go to the yellows or the oranges yet. We're going to start with these. So we're going to start with the lightest color you have, and we're going to trace around that inside shape you made. You don't have to stick right on the pencil line if you don't want to. It doesn't matter. But we're going to try to cover it up. That's just going to be a guide for us. And then I'm going to take the next lightest one I have, and I'm going to start coloring in. And I'm going to go round and round, sort of like I am doing a bullseye. Don't worry about trying to cover each little tiny piece of the white that you see of the paper come through, because that's going to be the trick in using the oil pastels today. All right, so I've got 2 colors on there so far. And then I'm going to take the darker brown, and I'm going to make some little zigzags on the outside of this circle. Okay? So when we do this, we're going to make the zigzags come out, not real far, and you'll see why we're going to do that in a minute. But we need these to be able to connect some of our petals onto. Keep going all the way around. And they don't have to be even. This is to be fun. Don't stress out about it. All right, now you're taking that same dark color that you have, and we're going to color a little bit more on the inside of that roundish shape we made. And as you can see, we're starting to build up a few colors. I'm going to go back to the lighter one, and I'm just going to color that in. Real light, and not pushing down very hard. So what do I have there? I have 3 colors, and now I'm going to take my paper towel and use probably my pointy finger works best. Wrap the paper towel on your finger, and now start pushing the colors together. Push them from the outside towards the center. And you'll see that these all blend together. That's what we want them to do. We want them to blend together. Oil pastels are fun to use because you can make them work together and mixed colors by just blending. That's what I'm going to keep doing all the way around. And hopefully if you've used oil pastels before, you know how to do this. But if you haven't, it's kind of a nice new medium to use. Just kind of work the colors together. Now, if you notice, I did fill in most of those white spaces where the paper was showing through. And we may come back to that in a little bit, but those are just the center parts of our sunflower. Now the best part. The sunflower, and hopefully maybe you've seen a real sunflower, starts from the center and it builds out with these big, beautiful yellow and orange, sometimes a little bit of brown or red petals. And I'm going to take yellow and I'm just going to draw some shapes. These sort of look, I don't know whether to call them football shapes or just petal shapes. And I'm going to keep working all the way around that circle or that shape we made in the center. And you notice I'm not filling them in right now. They don't all have to be the same size. Some can be skinny, some can be fat. It's kind of what you want to create here. And I'm going to keep going all the way around until I get totally around that one flower. And then I'm going to go to the next one. Because I chose to do 2, I will have some places that might run into the first flower, but that's called overlapping, and we don't care. That would be good. Just keep going. If you get to the edge of your paper, you can run your petals right off the edge. And that would be all right also. So that's one row of petals. But I have noticed when I look at real sunflowers, or like in this picture, there are a variety of petals. So I'm going to take an orange, light orange, I think you have light orange in your box of pastels. I'm going to take and make another row of petals in between that. And keep going all the way around. So what I did was I continued making those orange colored petals. And if you want to, you can take and do another row of yellow all the way around. It's sort of up to you. And you'll notice that I'm kind of overlapping. And while you were working, I was working, and I went ahead, and I'm going to stop here for a minute because I want you to see what I was doing. I started coloring in with the yellow oil pastel, just like we did the center. Don't feel that you have to fill in every little spot, because remember, we're going to use the paper towel to blend it. So I finished coloring in the inside yellow. Just keep going here. All right, so now I've done the inside row of yellow, and I started doing another row of yellow out here, but I probably should go back and color in my orange now. So I'm going to take the orange pastel, and I'm going to fill in this. You notice I'm not really worried that I am making each petal, see, I needed one in there, so I just added another one. I'm not worried that each petal is the same shape. I'm just going to fill it in, just like we did with the yellow. And I'll come back and do that one. And then my second row that I started with the yellow, I'm going to go back and fill that one in now. You may find while you are using your oil pastels, if you are pressing down fairly hard with them, they are going to start getting shorter and shorter, just like when you use a crayon. All you have to do if that's the problem is stop and tear the paper a little bit and then move the pastel down, and that will help you have more of the working space. Now I'm going to go back with my paper towel. Hopefully you can see now that we are blending the orange and the yellow, and those petals are starting to kind of mix in together, which is what the real flower does. Don't worry about them, like I said, don't worry about them being perfect. Keep working. The paper towel will allow you to make the colors more intense and fill in those white spots. If you do not have paper towel, you can use a rag, like from maybe an old t-shirt or an old terry cloth towel, or something that your family might have at home that you use for rags. All right, so we're just going to keep working and keep rubbing that pastel together. We kept working and building on the flowers. Now they're not done yet. Those were just kind of our getting started colors and blending them together. Now I don't want to forget the stems, because the stems are a very important part of this flower. So I'm going to suggest that you can take your pencil, or you can take the lightest green oil pastel you have and sketch a stem. And the stem is pretty thick. It's not just one line, because if you made one line, if you've ever seen a real sunflower, they get very big and heavy, and the stem needs to be able to hold them up. So I made it fairly thick. And then I'm adding some leaves. Now these leaves, again, you don't have to make them real fancy. You can make them look sort of like a heart. The little line in the center, because we're going to color it. And you notice this one's behind this flower, so I didn't color in the whole leaf. And I need a stem for this. And again, run the stem right off the end of your paper, because this isn't the whole flower. This is just the blossom and part of the stem. Now we're going to color in the stem just like we did here. I'm going to start with the lightest color. And I'm just going to put one layer of light green here. And don't panic if it doesn't match exactly. Remember, the oil pastel is going to fill in some of those white spots. So just add some color, and you can leave a little bit of it white if you want. Both of them the same. Get it started. All right. Now, since you have more than one green in your set, you can choose to use whichever greens you want, but I had to start with the light one, and now I'm going to put a little bit of dark on one side only, and you decide whether you want it on the right part of the stem or on the left part of the stem. But this is going to give us a little bit of shading, and if you've done shading in school, you know that that's important to make things look more realistic. So I'm going to add a little dark on this side, but I have to make it match. And then I'm going to add some dark on the bottom of each of my leaves also. So that would be kind of the shadow part. Again, I'm just worrying about coloring every little space. Just add some color, the darker color, to your leaf, just like you did with the stem. That's two colors of green. I used a light one and kind of a medium, and I have another dark green in my set, so I think I'm even going to add one more layer of dark color. If you don't have this many green in yours, it's okay, just use what you have. Do not use regular crayons though, because the regular crayons with the oil pastels will not, depending on what kind of crayon you have, they will not blend. So that's why we're using the oil pastels. All right, here we go again with the paper towel. Use your pointing finger and start pushing those colors together. Here we go. And we're going to keep working it until we get the colors to blend, just like we did with the petals on the flower. Blend it out. If it goes outside the line, that's really not a problem either. Just keep working with the oil pastel. Doing this upside down, I'm realizing that it doesn't really matter. I can still see where I am blending, and the leaves and the petals all seem to blend, whether it's right side up or upside down. All right, that's at least a little bit now that we can see that these flowers have a stem. They're kind of running off the bottom. All right, so we're going to go back and just do a little bit more finishing up with the flowers before we add some paint to them. So I'm going to ask you to choose another one of your oranges or yellows. I have a little bit of a darker orange, and in your set you may have it. And I'm going to put one more row of small petals in the center of my sunflower. So I'm really building up more than just yellow, because I want these sunflowers to be bright and cheery. And I'm going to go back and color those in now too, just like we did with the yellow. you can see now we have 1, 2, 3, almost 4 rows of petals work, and I added a little bit more around each of the flowers. And then I went back with my browns and I sort of filled in a little bit more. And as you can see, the colors should all start blending together, but you still should be able to see the center part of the sunflower and the petals. And of course, what we did with the stems was to add a little bit of green, and if you want them to be darker green, add more color. But we are going to add some watercolor now also, so don't worry if some of the places are not perfect for you, because we're not done yet. Before we start the watercolor, I am going to suggest that you take the darkest brown. Do not use black. The darkest brown oil pastel you have, and if you want to, you can go back and lightly fill in an outline very lightly. I am barely touching the paper with my pastel. I'm going back and I'm outlining the rows of petals that we made. And you'll see some will overlap each other, but what this does is allows you to see the rows of petals that you created on your sunflower. And I'm barely touching it. I can't say that enough. Don't press down hard on this row of oil pastel. Just keep it very light. And if you don't want to do this, perfectly fine. You don't have to add the outline. Sometimes I like to add it because it shows off a little bit more the individual shapes that we were working with. I'm not going to outline every little space here, but I am going to go back. And what I will tell you is, as you are working on this, if you see that there's some things you want to add back after we've done the painting on top, you can use your oil pastel on top of the watercolor once we do it. All right, so I need to finish this and take my paper towel, blend a little bit. You don't have, you can blend away some of the outlines if you want, blend them right into the petals. But again, remember, that's why we did it really light, just to sort of indicate where those petals are. This whole process is kind of building up color. It's not using one color to make a flower, it's using lots. And you can do this with other projects that you do. If you are drawing, let's say you're drawing a house, or a dog house with a dog in front of it, or you are drawing something about the sky and you are showing pictures of clouds and maybe a hot air balloon or something. You can layer your colors, lots of colors. And I'll do the same thing to this other petal, other petals of this flower too. But I wanted you to see that it does make it show up just a little bit better. All right, now watercolor. The paint that you have has a variety of colors in it. We are not going to be using all of the colors. But what I like to do when I start is to put a drop of water in the colors that I think I need. Now in yours, next to the white, there is a dark color, and I discovered that that's blue. So we do want water in there. We can see that this is a blue color also. It's a little different than the other one. Right next to it is a purple, and I discovered that there is another purple down here. They're a little different colors, but right now I put water in the purples and the blues. I didn't put water in anything else right now because we're not going to be using those other colors. Now this is the big brush I was talking about. It's got some really funny ends on it. The bristles are not real even, but that's okay because we're not going to be painting anything too fancy. We're going to take color and paint right on our paper and just move it around. Oh look, what happens when I put it on top of the flower? Do you notice how it is beading up? It's not sticking to the oil pastel. That's why we pressed hard with our oil pastel. Does not hurt to go over the color. These watercolor paints are a different color than I had at home, so you will see some different blues than I have, but it doesn't matter. And I'm using some of the purple. It's kind of a grayish purple, isn't it? And all we're doing is filling in the background to have a little bit more color. Now I said we weren't going to use other colors, but I'm noticing that I need to make a darker purple, so I'm going to take a little bit of the red that is there, and that allows me to make a different color. Keep going with our watercolor paints. And I'm painting right over the leaves, right on the edge. And you notice I covered the table with some old paper because we're going to run right off the edge of the paper here. And we want to do that. We want it to get all the way to the edge. Just kind of dabbing also. Let's see if we can get another color in here also. Skies are not always plain blue. Lots of times the sky has purple in it, and may even have a little bit of orange, red. Just going to keep adding color. All right. When you are happy with it, when you step back and you look at it and go, oh, I think that's plenty, stop. Don't keep going. Now what I did was I took a paper towel and I wadded it up, and all I'm going to do is dab to pick up some of the extra water, and you'll notice that lightens the color a little bit. And you can do it on the flower too if you want. And if you like that, if those are the colors that make you happy, then stop. If you have your own watercolor paint and you have some other colors of blues and purples, you could certainly add those to this. I would again stay away from anything real dark because we don't want to have too much of the background covered. I don't want it to be too dark. I want to keep it light so it shows up the flowers that you just spent so much time drawing. While that is drying, I mentioned to you this book, and I wanted you to see a little bit more about why I like this book. There is a young man in this book who decided he wanted to plant a garden, and so his family helped him dig up some dirt, but he didn't want it to be in lines. He wanted to make a circle garden. So you can see the dark here, that's the dirt that the dad or the family member who was helping him dug up. And here, the young man and his sister are going to plant sunflower seeds. And they're going to plant them in the circle, and you notice the little tiny stems are starting to come up. And he waited and waited patiently for the flowers to grow. And when they grew, they were these bright, large, beautiful sunflowers. And if you think about it, they all grew up in a circle, which became, according to the book, the sunflower house. The parents were too tall to get into the sunflower house, but the kids could play in there all summer long with the sunflowers all around them. They played pretend they were in the jungle. They had a good time being out one night. They stayed out with their flashlights and they made like a little tent inside the sunflower house. And as the summer kept going, some of the flowers started to get a little bit brown, and the leaves got a little bit brown, and it was becoming a little cooler, so summer was going away and fall was coming. And the boy and his sister tried to do everything they could to keep the sunflowers from falling over or turning and breaking. But then they realized it was really okay, that the flowers had been really fun to play with, and they discovered that the center part of the flower was important to them too, because that's where all the seeds were going to come. The birds also helped them when they were taking the seeds out of the center of the sunflowers. But they were able to collect handfuls of seeds that they will plant for next year to make another sunflower house. So I thought that was just a fun book, and it's kind of a neat way to look at planting sunflowers. All right, so we'll go back and we're going to look at our picture. It isn't quite done and it isn't quite dry, but I'm going to go ahead and put the final touches. I did not finish outlining this, but I had mentioned to you, once the watercolor dries, you can go back with your oil pastels and you can add another layer if you like, right on top of where you have the watercolor, and that will be an outline like we did around here. And that's up to you if you want to do it that way. And now I'm going to take my glue bottle and I'm just going to put a few drops of glue, hopefully. All right, so I put a few drops of glue. You can see the white drops. And remember, we don't use a lot of glue. A little dab will do you. And they don't have to be real evenly spaced, but we're only putting the glue in the center of our sunflowers. And you have in your packet real sunflower seeds. And I'm going to suggest that you take those sunflower seeds and now you're just going to put them into the glue. And if it makes it easier for you, you can put a few, shake it around, and the ones that don't stick will fall off. And you've got a few more that you can play. Or you can do them one at a time. I'm not very patient, so I like to just put a handful on there. But you can do what you want. And you know that the glue is going to dry clear, so you will not see those white spots when your picture is finished. One last thing I did after I'm letting these dry here a little bit. One last thing I did was I looked at a real sunflower, and while I was looking at one, I noticed that there was a ladybug sitting on one of the sunflowers, and it was sitting on the petal. So after I had done everything else with my painting and I had the seeds on, I thought, you know what, I really wanted to add another ladybug. I really can't do it on this one because it's wet, so I'm going to move this one over here and let it dry. But if you notice on this one, there's a little tiny ladybug, and the ladybug is a red oil pastel with some black spots, and that's all. And you can add that if you want to, or you can just leave it go. So I hope you've had fun playing with oil pastels and watercolor and creating your own sunflowers. And remember, you want to bring your finished art pieces to the library so that we can display them for the end of summer art show. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.